are really glad to have you with us for our capstone of the morning, which is making sustainable landscapes real and practical in your own landscape. And so really, without further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to Andrea and Celeste and Taylor, and they are representing our Sustainable Landscapes work group, which is a great extension collaboration that works on the Smart Yards program and many other efforts. And so we are just excited to be able to share this program with you today and really encourage our master gardeners to be carrying the sustainability message to our communities across the state. So Andrea, thanks so much for being with us. Andrea, Dr. Ludwig is our stormwater specialist. So she is the most plant-focused engineer that you will ever meet. And so we have the opportunity to work with her on a lot of our smart yards and native plant type projects that bring together her emphasis and work area of clean water and our emphasis area of great plants and supporting the sustainability of water and soils across the state of Tennessee. So now I really will let you talk.
What a wonderful introduction and a wonderful way to bring all of our areas of expertise and our interest all together to, have that message of, making Tennessee a more sustainable, more nature-friendly place. So that's where I really enjoy working with master gardeners and horticulturalists across the state on this common mission of making sure that we've got clean land, healthy land, clean water all across the state. And there's no better place for us to start to do this work than all of us in our very own landscapes. And it's always so fun to talk with master gardeners and others across the state working towards this common goal, because as we all know on this call, our healthy land and clean water are important to make sure that we can continue the quality of life that we have, that we enjoy in all parts of Tennessee. So I'm honored to kick us off this morning on this topic and introduce a little bit about our Tennessee Smart Yards program and how we're helping to make sustainability, possible and practical in our very own yards. And so many of you guys have probably been doing a lot of these types of actions and practicing stewardship in a variety of different ways. So hopefully this presentation will just maybe give you a new idea or a new frame to look at your landscape and look at your yard and spark some new interest. And then I'm going to kick it over to, we have a field site visit brought to us by Taylor Reeder, and then we're going to wrap it up with Celeste Scott out in Madison County. So without further ado, this morning in this session, we want to talk exactly about what sustainable landscaping is. Let's put a definition to it. What are some of the goals of sustainable landscaping? What does it look like? Again, we're going to go to our field site and look to see some practices in the landscape in a yard and making it practical. And then what resources are we working on and have we put out there through UT Extension, through our work groups, in order to help you guys all across the state. So what is sustainable landscaping exactly? It is a set of practices that work with nature to support a variety of different ecosystem services. We expect a lot out of our environment and we enjoy it. And so we want to support local wildlife. We want to conserve energy and water, improve our air and water quality, all while also being able for us as property owners, land managers, and visitors to outdoor spaces, being able to enjoy them. So this is really what the definition, what the concept of sustainable landscaping is. It's something that's going to work both for the environment around us, our ecosystem, but recognizing that we as humans are part of that ecosystem, and how can we work with nature, with the nature around us in order to maintain some of those ecosystem services that we enjoy that enhance our quality of life. So as an engineer, again, I'm a little bit of a fish out of water in a lot of horticultural circles, but the framework in which I look at sustainable landscapes, is looking at a landscape as a system with balance. And my best example of that would be, a stream. This is one of my favorite swimming holes in the Smoky Mountains. And this little stream, represents a system in balance. We've got a watershed, and a stream is moving water and sediment load by gravity. And that whole system is in balance, right? But it's a very natural balance. And so looking at the landscape and how we can maintain balance and understand that how disturbances might result in responses in that balance that might require us to think about things a little bit differently, to change our management, to have a different response in our landscape will help us understand that system and know how to manage it better. So that way we can in turn gain those ecosystem services, maintain them in our landscape, everything from making sure we've got fresh drinking water, good swimmable reservoirs and rivers, supporting wildlife all across our state in our really high areas of biodiversity. And then of course, supporting pollination, because we all literally depend on pollination for the food that we eat, the food and fiber that we use. So all those ecosystem services representing a balance in the landscape. And then of course, when we have disturbances and we have some imbalances in the system, that's when we start to see some issues at the community scale. It might look like some more local flooding in our roadways, just because now that imbalance is we have too much water at the surface and not enough places to put it because we've built out perhaps. Another imbalance that you might see is a lot of algae in our surface water, so algal blooms or eutrophication, so more nutrients, more energy in the water, resulting in this imbalance, this response in our water quality as algae is able to utilize those nutrients that run off of our landscape. And then also another response might be just now our landscapes aren't supporting the biodiversity that they potentially could if we were able to bring back some of that functionality. And a lot of this could also manifest itself, right in our very own yards, from experiencing runoff, experiencing nuisance ponding in different areas, again, having too much water in different places where we're not able to manage it in a way that we would like to. And again, this often has to do with what is happening around us. And so recognizing that our landscape and our yard is part of the greater landscape around us, and thinking about, our place perhaps in the watershed, particularly when it comes to managing water issues. So here's just an example, First Creek watershed in Knoxville, a tributary to the Tennessee River. And that's where some of those local flooding pictures came from. And you can see just here and with this aerial photo, just the amount of changes that have happened in the landscape because of our human activities, and therefore resulting in some potential issues and making some responses and making us need to manage that landscape a little bit different than perhaps we did before in order to maintain that balance that we're looking for. So looking at water quality across the state, this is a map of the water quality assessment that the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation puts out every 2 years, excuse me. And so all the blue streams you see here are supporting our designated uses. We use water in so many different ways. And so the blue streams here are of a quality that helps support our uses as needed. Unfortunately, the red streams you see here are impaired in a way that don't allow us to use that water quality the way that we need to. And just to kind of break that down by the numbers, only about half of our streams are assessed across the state. We have 60,000 miles of rivers and streams. About 22% of those that are assessed are supporting our intended use, and 27% or so are impaired in a way. And nearly 4,000 miles of those streams are impaired because of runoff from developed land. And so that's our downtown areas, but that's also our residential spaces, our very own backyards. And the leading causes of us not being able to use this water the way that we would like to is bacteria, sediment, nutrients, and changes in riparian or that creekside vegetation alteration. And so again, these are things that as property owners, we can be part of the solution through sustainable landscaping, because every little bit is going to help defend against some of those responses we're seeing because of the changes in the landscape around us. So what are the goals of sustainable landscaping? What are we looking for here? We are wanting to choose a set of practices that are going to work for people and our environment. These practices are going to meet our needs for our use of space, how we would like to use our outdoor spaces. We're going to consider, of course, our maintenance considerations as well as our budget. We want to maintain being in line with our community expectations, of course. We want to be in balance with our local environment, again, recognizing that we're just a small piece of the ecosystem around us. We want to support biodiversity and protect natural resources, and then reduce external inputs and impacts as much as possible and kind of close loops. So reduce, reuse, recycle as much as possible within our space, compost, save those nutrients for building your soil health, all of those things, trying to close your loops inside of the mesocosm that we have agency over. And so at the end of the day, smart yards, making smart choices, implementing these sustainable landscaping practices are going to lead to healthier landscapes around us in our communities, which are going to lead to cleaner water as part of that watershed. And then all of that going back to help us maintaining high biodiversity, maintaining soil quality in our landscapes. So it's kind of this self-fulfilling, great process here if we all can focus on function and, again, working with nature as we make some of our decisions. So don't fret, we do have a program here to help us understand what some of these sustainable practices are and how we might be able to broaden. I know a lot of us are probably doing some of this already. How can we broaden our approach and really think about things even deeper? So Tennessee Smart Yards was established first off by its original name of Tennessee Yards and Neighborhoods after being adapted from Florida Extension's Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. And this was way back in a pilot program in 2009. And you might be asking, what is a Tennessee Smart Yard? It is one that is in balance with the local environment for the benefit of both people and our ecosystem. So from this program and this pilot program way back 10, 12 years ago, we were able to develop, adapt the materials from our colleagues at Florida and really adapt them for Tennesseans and create this roadmap to help us understand, what are we doing on our landscapes? How can we think about sustainable practices? What kind of practices would be beneficial for us to adopt on our property, given our site conditions and our unique conditions around our local environment, but then also given our unique set of needs that each and every one of us has in terms of using our space. So this program is very action oriented. So right now, the past 2 years, our work group has worked to take these materials that were once delivered in day-long workshops and then also by extension professionals across the state in modular form. Now we have a website, a web platform where any Tennessean can participate in this program from the comfort and safety of their own home. So we have our Tennessee Yardstick Workbook online, and each of our 9 foundational principles has a video presented by our extension professionals related to each of these practices, these principles. So right plant, right place, managing your soils and mulch, reduce, reuse, recycle, I've already used that term today, water efficiently, fertilize appropriately, managing yard pests, reducing stormwater, my favorite, of course, providing for wildlife, and protecting that water's edge if you happen to live on a water body. So just to show you some examples, again, this is very action oriented. And so through these modules, we share information on how you can adopt practices, sustainable landscaping practices to create healthy landscapes in your yard. And so the way this works is there are about 72 inches worth of actions out there under each of these, under the collection of principles. And once you reach 36 inches of action, you can certify your yard as a Tennessee Smart Yard. So here are just some examples of these actions that you can learn about online in our platform and our YouTube videos. Right plant, right place. Again, each of these 6 different actions, if these make sense for you and you're adopting them in your landscape, you can check it off and earn those inches. And so each principle has a set of actions to go with it, as well as how many inches you can accumulate. And again, all at the comfort and safety of your own home, but then also at your own pace. So here is a look at our new website where you can find out more and find all these resources and participate at your own pace. And then again, come back to this website after you've reached your 36 inches and maybe even further, and tell us how you've done it. And we will certify your yard as a Tennessee Smart Yard and send you the certificate that acknowledges your contributions, not only to make your own property the best that it can be, but then also contributing to maintaining our healthy land and clean water. So, of course, everything is work, right? So there's going to be some things, especially when we adopt new practices, some road bumps that you might run into. So you might ask yourself, well, is this going to cost a lot more money? Incorporating new plants and native plants into your landscape, yes, it could potentially cost you a little bit to get some new plants into your landscape, but there's some budget-friendly, economical ways to approach that by using small stock, so plugs or bare root stock. And then, of course, reduce, reusing, and recycling is one of our principles. And so using what you have on site definitely can save you in the long run. Noticing that there's a different aesthetic when we're working with native plants. We're going to focus on function and supporting all those ecosystem services. So really knowing that that your aesthetic may change as a result of this focus on function, but then remembering that we can use cues to care, so simple mowing paths, simple ways to make sure that we still have this orderly frame in which we're looking at our landscape. And then the question of time, do we have enough time in our day to adopt some new practices? So there's a misconception sometimes that native plants and native landscaping is no maintenance. And of course, many of us know that that's not the case, but it's just a different type of maintenance. And in the long run, it's going to require less inputs and perhaps less energy. But on the front end, it might take a little bit more time to get that established into a mature landscape. So just recognizing that a different type of maintenance might be needed and our expectations on when that mature landscape will flourish, that time frame might need to be expanded a little bit. So, of course, our individual actions on our own property can reap many benefits in terms of our environment around us. So saving fertilizer, reducing the amount of nutrients out there, reducing runoff, diverting waste from the landfill. But as a community, as all of us adopt practices, those benefits compound as well. So here you can see just the numbers when we go from one home adopting some of these practices up to 75, what that looks like. And this program, we've gotten quite a bit of feedback so far on our new web-based delivery. So terrific program, very helpful, really motivating people to look at their landscape, particularly in the last couple of years as we've been all home more and more. And then this last comment is really one of my favorites. We hope that the metal yard sign that you're able to purchase after you certify can inspire others to make a change to a Tennessee Smart Yard. So here's just a little Wordle to show you all of the watersheds across Tennessee where we have certified Tennessee Smart Yards. And if you happen to be an early adopter and attended one of the previous workshops and certified your landscape before about October 2020, we would love for you to come to the website and let us know that you're an early adopter and kind of get on our radar with this new web platform. So this is what we have online, and that was a little bit of a 101 on what sustainable landscaping is. And now let's see what this looks like in an actual landscape. So we are honored, we're excited to have Taylor Reeder in Williamson County and honored to have her with one of our Tennessee Smart Yard certifiers, Mr. Bob Ravener. So I'm going to kick it over to Taylor.
This is Bob. So Bob is here in Franklin, lives in downtown Franklin, and he is part of our new community-wide effort for doing smart yards programming. So Bob, tell us a little bit about, he was the one that spearheaded this idea that this could be a community-wide effort and we could get in as many people as possible. So tell us a little bit about what interested you in the program.
Thanks, Taylor, and Andrea, thanks so much. First, let me give a call out to both Taylor and Andrea for spearheading this effort, because if this were a school system, I'd still be in elementary school when it comes to landscaping and sustainable landscaping, because I'm like a lot of people in the past where you've got busy jobs to do and you get a landscape person that comes out and puts things in, you take their advice, but you find out later as you learn more about what's going on, that's not always the best things for sustainable landscaping along the way, and sometimes can be destructive by putting invasive things in place. And so It's been tremendous to kind of learn along the way. But also, one of the things that I volunteer for is I'm on the board of Friends of Franklin Parks, which works directly with the city to help sustain our parks and trail systems. And working closely with them and learning from them and trying to incorporate the kinds of lessons that we're learning has all been really instrumental in helping us move this process along. That's how, when I came up with this idea to let's try to work together as a community, stumbled upon the Tennessee Smart Yards workbook, which then led me to Taylor and Andrea. And the learning process began as we built out this program for what I think could be a community effort. Because I think, like in most cases, people want to do the right thing, like I do. You just don't understand necessarily what the right thing to do is and what could be actually counterproductive or in downright destructive. And so it's been a great learning process for me and for the community to get this thing going. And just by learning some of the things I heard Andrea talk about, there are things that are already going on within people's yards that you may already be far along the path to becoming a Tennessee Smart Yard. And it's not like you have to throw everything away and start anew. It's by learning and developing and growing along with the process that you begin to understand that you can make evolutionary changes that ultimately help your own yard become even more of a smart yard without really intruding on the beauty, the caliber, or the expense of what you're trying to do.
Yeah. And he's got his certified smart yard sign here. Also, he's a certified bird sanctuary. So we have actually seen over 3 or 4 different species of birds, types of birds. I'm not a bird person, so correct me. But in his landscape now, and he's added some new things to his. So that's a bluebird house right there. He's added. And what Bob was telling me as we were walking through his yard was that, you know, he's been slowly adding to his landscape different parts of the smart yard inches. So it wasn't like he overhauled his entire landscape. Like he mentioned, you don't have to come in here and bulldoze everything and start new, and just implementing these small incremental steps. And he's done that and gotten certification. He already had practices in place that qualified as inches on the smart yard certification, and he didn't know it until he went through that list. So tell us a little bit about some of the things you've added. We'll kind of walk through the landscape.
Sure, you want to walk this way?
Yes. Oh, and we wanted to show y'all something exciting. We have some beneficials in place here. So we can see the ladybug or lady beetle pupa on his crepe myrtles here. So always happy to, and I don't know if y'all can see that, see some beneficials acting in the landscape as our part of our IPM. So let's walk through, Bob, and just kind of show them some of the things, that you've added.
So one thing that I learned that was this past year was the first time we've done this is we've always tried to use natural mulching. And in our case here, this area, pine straw mulching, which is great, but we put it on top of the leaves and the clippings. In the past and throughout my working life, we would always bring in landscape maintenance people and they'd come in and they'd clear everything out and you think it looks great and beautiful, and it does. But what you don't really comprehend is that it's not doing anything to add to the nutrients within the soil. And so what we decided to do this year is instead of picking up all the leaves, we left them in place and put the pine straw mulch on top of it so that it would continue to build on the soil as well.
The organic matter. Yeah, that's on the reduce, reuse, recycle of the 9 principles. So we're recycling that organic material.
And some of the different plants in here, we've noticed, as Taylor had mentioned, the birds are naturally drawn to these to create nests, and there's a lot of food around that can help them continue to grow and develop along the way. And we put in some different trees and different plantings, trying to balance the difference between what is evergreen, deciduous, and then adding some color over here to try to draw pollinators to the area as well. And so I would tell you, it may just be me, but for the first time, I've seen more birds and more bees and butterflies are starting to show up as well, far more than I've ever seen in the past. And so it's been a tremendous way to balance the landscape with the wildlife and the natural habitat that we're trying to build and grow.
Yeah. So we've seen wildlife, we've seen birds. Like he said, I saw some bees he added over here, this bed that has flowers. We've got some bee balm, some asters. He's talking about adding maybe some rudbeckia to some of his beds. So increasing the pollinators, of course, like Andrea said, they're integral to all that we do in our lives. And so increasing pollinators, birds, we've got all kinds of wildlife. So adding that to his yard, adding that and increasing that. And he talked about food and places. So he has a really neat water feature here. We turned it off so that y'all could hear us. But it's almost like a little splash pad. But he can turn it on with his phone. He is very high tech. Let's see. So we actually saw when he turned it off, the birds came over like, where is our water feature? So having that as a source for the wildlife as well.
You know, one thing that to mention water features, one of the things we did, and a lot of lawns have irrigation systems. And one of the things that happened with us, which happens with a lot of homes, is you spend a lot of money on the water irrigation, especially if you're using city water. We ultimately added a master valve to the irrigation system, which will shut it off at the source when it's not irrigating. And the other thing we did was we included in our irrigation system a barometer gauge that's basically the rain gauge that will determine if there's been previous rain. It won't turn on the irrigation system, or if it's even forecast over 60%, it won't irrigate. And so it saves water that way as well.
Wonderful. Yeah. So all of us have seen irrigation running while it's raining, and it's just redundant and it doesn't serve a purpose and it's a waste. So this is great to add those systems to your irrigation so that you don't have to manually come turn off. If it's raining, it knows to shut itself off. And what about your downspouts? What do we have over here?
So we tried to complement some art and creativity with the water runoff. Obviously, any structural foundational person will tell you, and by code, you've got to have water run away from the foundations. And we certainly have that to the extent needed. But then another way to do that is, instead of having just a straight downspout, you can put in decorative features like rain chains that go into a drain at the end, but it kind of adds another level of artwork and just one kind. There are hundreds of different kinds of rain chains, but it kind of adds another different feature that accentuates the water that comes within your yard as well.
Wonderful. What's some of the most fun things that you've implemented, one that you've been really excited about?
I think just adding different things that combine the color with the greenery, adding some yard art around, as you can see, that kind of creates more of a kind of a serene oasis, if you will, that just makes it more pleasing to spend time. I would tell you, of any place around our house, where we spend the most time is on the back porch, because it's like looking into an oasis of greenery and wildlife. So it's a relaxing feature as well.
And we're right in downtown Franklin, and there's all this wildlife, all this activity. So you know that there's a good habitat for them. That's why they're here. And let's see, what about some of the native plants you've added?
Well, we've added some various things. You can see we added some other features just to create a little bit more softening that you can do. And I did all this myself. Just got some trellises locally, put them up on the columns, put in some climbing hydrangeas and some different flowers that we have there. We put some planters on the back porch that, for the first time, based on my newfound knowledge, we brought inside and kept as air filters, if you will, for the winter, and then brought them back outside. And so great ways to kind of accentuate not only the beauty of the home, but then also keeping the fresh nature of it around as well.
And if you'll look, he's got a privacy screen, which a lot of us try to implement. But one thing I was mentioning to him is it's great to see that it's not a monoculture. That he's got a variety. He's got magnolias, he's got hollies, he's got arborvitaes, he's got other evergreens mixed throughout. So we're not having that one straight line of, arborvitaes or cypress or whatever. So he's got a monoculture. He's got, throughout his whole landscape, a lot of different types of plant materials, which is great to see.
Yeah, one of the other things we added was this water feature, again, to attract birds. And ended up buying one of these solar pumps that works for about 30 days. So I would not recommend these on Amazon. So I'm looking for a different feature after this. But one of the things we've learned with the process is that birds will only be attracted to moving water. And so finding a way, algae will collect in standing water. And so finding a way to keep the water moving, again, brings more wildlife to the area.
Okay, so what we were talking about is he put in some, and sorry about the training, you guys. He put in some hydrangeas, oak leaf hydrangeas back here, added some more native plant materials, and is phasing out some of the plants that he wasn't aware that, you know, may be invasive or may not be as beneficial to the landscape. So it's a process. It's not an all one and done thing. It's going to be a process, and that's something that, like Andrea said, at your own pace. You know, doing this and implementing at your own pace. There's nothing that says you have to get it all done at one time. So what else, Bob? What else do you want to tell us about your landscape and your journey?
I can't emphasize the workbook enough because it opened my eyes to things I had no idea we were already doing, and then new things we needed to do, like the videos are very helpful. Getting the soil sample, just bringing the sample down to the Ag Center and getting that tested to find out what's going to be more beneficial for your garden, what's going to thrive, what's not going to thrive. And it's really just this learning process that we keep building on each day. And every chance we have, we try to find new ways to continuously improve what we're doing so that it becomes even more attractive to wildlife, pollinators, and becomes more natural and native to Tennessee.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bob. We really appreciate you showing us around. Does anybody have any questions for Bob? Okay, that sounds great. We really appreciate y'all joining in and Bob. And we really want, with this effort community-wide, to get as many people involved as possible. So that's really our big push is, you know, starting local and really getting all the people that we can involved in this process and learning about Smart Yard. So we really appreciate Bob spearheading this and getting us all, gathering us together. He keeps us on task every time we meet to promote sustainable landscaping in our community.
Absolutely. I'll just chime in to say, you know what, Bob humbly said he didn't have an experience, man. He brings it in passion. So he may call himself a novice horticulturalist here, but he has picked up full steam and picked up a lot of these practices. And what he might not have had in previous experience, he brings heaps of passion to this. So thank you, Bob, so much for sharing your landscape with us. It is a perfect example of sustainable landscaping practices, practical in your very own yard. Thank you.
We really appreciate y'all giving us this opportunity to share our program that we're doing community-wide, and we just hope other communities see this and see that, you know, it can be done in a larger scale than just individually. We can get everyone involved.
Absolutely wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. And that's a great segue. So exciting stuff happening right there in downtown Franklin. And we have resources, again, that can go to work for all of our communities all across the state. So kicking it over to Celeste Scott to share with everyone a little bit about some more of those resources.
Yes, thank you so much, Andrea. I feel like this was the perfect time for us to introduce several of these different publications to you all, some online resources that we have. I love the way that things have flowed today with Andrea introducing sustainable landscape principles to us. And then Bob and Taylor being able to walk us through someone's landscape at their home who's trying to actively implement some of these practices. And I saw in the question answer box thing, I'll just address a few of these. One of Miss Mary said, you happen to hold tours so that interested gardeners can visit sustainable landscapes. I think that's a really neat question, because our hope is that entire neighborhoods will adopt these practices, go through the Smart Yards training, start making some of these changes in their landscape. And I feel like once we get several, you know, community areas on board, and we could have several like tour locations within a local area, it would make complete sense for us to try to host a tour of some of these one day in the future. So I think that would be don't you like that idea, Andrea? We have never talked about that before, but I think it's perfect.
I love it. And this is where the best ideas come from, right? All of our great partners and folks here. Thank you. Yeah, awesome.
And then, Andrea, while since we're both here still chatting, there was another question in the chat that said, well, in the question answer, and they were talking about how HOAs have some HOAs have quite a few restrictions on things they can and can't do. And some of the things that they don't allow actually could be very beneficial for trying to create a sustainable habitat there in your residential landscape. And they're asking, are there any plans to reach out and educate the large companies or associations that manage our HOAs and get them on board with current practices like smart yards? And I think you probably have a good answer for that.
Absolutely. Thank you for monitoring the Q&A. I was still in the chat box land. So of course, Q&A. Thank you, Celeste. Great question. And I have been on no less than 3 calls just this week talking about the need for some sort of comprehensive, cohesive education for HOAs, property managers, and some of our commercial partners. So of course, there is education through UT Extension for some commercial applicators, definitely, but we want to bring Tennessee Smart Yards and some of those more niche practices, to focus a little bit more. So we're going to be working on that, absolutely. And we see the need. We're hearing the request from all sorts of different folks. Just yesterday, again, I was on a call with a state nutrient reduction strategy, trying to keep nutrients out of our waterways so that we don't send them down to the Mississippi. And that need was highlighted even further. So absolutely working with HOAs, those cues to care, just simply creating a more orderly frame, having a mown path around your pollinator garden, just making these small tweaks to bring order to the eye can really go a long way with appeasing the HOAs. And then definitely signage. If you've got a pollinator garden, put out a sign, make people aware. And then if your HOA or if your neighbors are still not on board, maybe it's time, to take some action into your own hands and ask, well, what can I do to help them see that we're nurturing all of our communal natural resources. So thank you.
Yes, and then I'd also like to add, Andrea and I have been talking about this recently. There are many native plants, cultivars of native plants, or some just specific species that have more, we'll call them tailored looks to them, if you will. So I feel like sometimes people, they associate native plants with wildness and that weediness and look of unkemptness, but that doesn't have to be the case, right? So and hopefully we can, we're talking about that might be one of our next endeavors as far as creating a list of plants that would be more aesthetically compact, more pleasing to the eye from like a roadside aspect. So maybe those would be some things to take into consideration as far as those HOAs and things like that go. So hopefully we can get that coming down the pipeline.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen because I definitely want to share these resources to y'all. Like I said, we've had an introduction to the concept, we've seen it put into practice, but we want something that you all can access on your own and know that it's always going to be there for you to go back and reference as you try to achieve some of these principles. And I have a new monitor. It's like a big, huge, giant monitor. And so I'm trying to figure out how to do my screen share without letting y'all see my entire crazy desktop. I know y'all don't want to see that. So I think I've done it. You should be looking at my my window that says UT Hort. Is that what we're looking at? Great.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so let me move some of this other stuff out of the way. Got things laying on top of it. Okay, so if you are not familiar with uthort.com, I want to encourage everybody to go there today and check it out, please. Super, super easy to remember the website address, uthort.com. When you get here, this is what our homepage looks like. So we've got a banner here, different pictures from across the state, and then you can look right beneath that, and there's a scrolling ribbon that highlights all of these. We've tried to separate things out into areas. So what else do we have on the homepage? There's a search box here on the top right hand corner that will help you search out specific publications. If you have a topic in mind, something you'd like to look at for that day, you just type that word in the search box and it's going to pull up publications that have that word in the title. Okay, so that's what makes it a little tricky, is if that particular word isn't in the title, it might not pull up. So you might have to try a few different search keywords if you are planning on searching the site in that fashion. And then make sure you scroll on down to the bottom. We've got upcoming events. You can see right here, Third Thursdays with Plants. What is Sustainable Landscapes? That's us. That's what we're doing right now. So if you're ever wondering if there are classes, sessions that are open to the public that, you know, aren't specifically Master Gardener things, just statewide horticulture information, please share this with folks, because this is our calendar here for the year. If you have Instagram, you can hop on there and see what some of the most recent feeds there were. And then here on the bottom left, we have a new on uthort.com. So this kind of features things that were recently added. For example, this one right here, this publication outlines how to attract and provide for a wide range of butterflies in the home garden. I just added that yesterday because I did a class on it, and I realized that we have a UT publication on butterfly gardening that wasn't on our UT Hort site. So I added it, and it's featuring it here in the bottom. And this is going to change every couple days. It just kind of rotates through the, most 10 recent things that have been added. So that's how I just kind of wanted to introduce everybody to the site and how to kind of maneuver around. If we go to the educational resources, these are those different areas I was telling you about. We've done our best to categorize the publications into these areas. So if you came to the site knowing that you wanted to find out something about vegetable gardening, but you weren't sure exactly what you wanted to see about it, you could just click here on vegetable gardens, and it's going to take you to everything that we have in that section that we've classified into that section. So to go along with what we've been talking about today, I want to introduce the Stewardship in Lawns, Gardens, and Landscapes module right here. We just click on that. And this brings up everything that we have kind of, given those keywords to as far as stewardship goes. And I do have a few publications in particular that I want to introduce to y'all today. One of them is on this page, but I'm going to skip past it because I want to talk about a different one first. I think it's on page 3. Here we go. Sustainable landscaping, planning, and plant selection. And really, y'all, this publication just goes hand in hand with the things that Andrea, introduced to us today. And it goes into even a little bit more depth onto each of these issues. And I love the way that she organized it because it introduces everything in the form of a question, which is super helpful to me. And she provides a quick answer right underneath each question. So it's a fun way to just kind of scroll through here and highlight those different areas. We talked about budgeting. We talked about, what all does sustainable landscaping entails. Obviously, we talked about what are some of those benefits, and it just, like I said, goes into more detail on each of these. But I really like when we get down, and also the pictures are phenomenal. Thank you so much, Andrea. I'm loving these pictures. This was a great picture right here on top of page 4. It's showing some oak leaf hydrangea, some Amsonia, eastern redbud, Baptisia down here on the bottom right. These are all native, and how beautiful are they in our landscape? And I would venture to bet that many of you have these plants in your landscapes already. So just like Bob was mentioning, discovering things that he was already doing in his landscape, right? And that allowed him to check off some of those areas. So obviously we want to expand on those, but just to know that we're already doing a lot of that and didn't even know it is really, really cool to me. She also highlighted an area in here about non-native species. So if you're having some trouble deciphering between some of those, we've got some good guidance on that. Some great pictures. And then again, it's always helpful to have a nice little chart here for quick reference. So some of the practices that we've been talking about and some examples of things that would be more sustainable, right? Something else that you could do instead of that. So for example, we have maximizing lawn as the dominant landscape feature. An example of how a sustainable alternative would be minimizing lawn space to the size that matches the needs of your family's activities. So I have 2 little kids. I need lots of lawn space. We play ball. We play soccer. My son's wanting to learn to do baseball. So we need quite a bit of lawn space to do what we need to do, but that may not suit everyone's needs. So I'm really just wanted to take a few minutes and make sure that you all knew about this publication if you didn't already, and encourage you to just go back and take some time to really study that and look into it a bit deeper. The next thing, I know we're getting short on time, but I want to show y'all at least two other publications. So let's go back to page 1. I know I saw it, leveraging your landscape. Okay, let's click on here about read more. We try to give a little blip about what you're about to see for each of these before you actually click on the link. So this takes us to our leveraging your landscape publication W869, and this is a guide to evaluating and planning for functional, enjoyable outdoor spaces. So really, I encourage everyone to take a look at this, because if you're planning on making any kind of changes in your landscape, there are so many things that we really need to think about before we just jump into this. I've had so many calls here at the extension office where folks have hired a professional to come out and redo their landscape. And while the end result is beautiful, they're still not happy with it because it's not what they needed and it's not what they wanted. But that might not be the lawn care professional's fault, right? So maybe there wasn't good open communication there in that partnership. Maybe they just told the lawn care people, I want it low maintenance and I want it to look nice. But in reality, they just didn't know, the homeowner didn't know how to communicate exactly what they needed or wanted to that lawn care professional. And this publication is going to help you be able to do that very specifically. So if you are hiring some professionals to come in and help you redo your landscape, you're going to have a really nice map. We'll call it a roadmap on to help guide them to what you really want. And even if you're not hiring anybody to help you, if you're just doing it yourself, it makes sense to know what you need before you start. So the first thing, obviously, we want to determine what's important to you in that landscape, okay? The next big idea is we need to look at what we have. So Andrea walks us through how to create a base map of our property. I'm going to show you, I'm going to skip over a few pages and show you what we're talking about for a base map. Now, this looks pretty fancy with a computer, but you can just get out a pencil and a sheet of paper and just sketch this out. We want to see your rough property perimeters. We need to see the structures there. We want to make notes about the high spots in your landscape where you have some slope or elevation. It's important to see, this was, they looked down through an aerial photo, obviously, of this home here on the top left, and then kind of created the sketch on the bottom right. We can see where we can expect to have afternoon shade. Obviously, here in the front of the house here, we have morning sun. And so this just kind of helps orient yourself to your property and really get to know it a bit more intimately if you've never really considered any of these things. I also like that they put, this is the direction that the prevailing winds come from, because if they decide that they need some protection from winds, they're not going to need a screen down here on this bottom side of the property. They're going to need it over here on this exposed side. So we'll start by doing a base map and then just filling in that base map with bubble maps of ideas, things that you are thinking that you might like to use certain areas of your property for. It doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to get into detail with every little individual plant. Just kind of bubble map out. This area I'd like to have for raised beds, and this area over here we'd like to do composting there, and sit on it for a few days, because I guarantee you that your ideas are probably going to change, right? So as things kind of set in and you begin to contemplate on those, you can easily change a bubble map, whereas if you jumped right in and implemented something in real life, it'd be a lot harder to move that after the fact. So I really love this publication. And then these 2 pages, page 3 and 4, are super important if you are working with a landscape professional. It kind of outlines some questions that could help guide them to get you what you really want and need in your landscape. So if you ever decide to do that, please check this publication out. Go through here, print these 2 pages off and answer the questions and give them to your landscape professional so that they will have that roadmap to help you better achieve your goals. One more I want to show y'all before I let you go. One more, let's go back here. And this particular publication isn't in the sustainable, that stewardship in lawns category. It fits more ideally in our wildlife category, which I don't see here at the moment. So I'll just type it up here. Wildlife. Managing wildlife around your home. And you might be thinking, well, this doesn't sound like a publication that's going to go along with what we talked about today. And I will say, from the title, you are right. It doesn't seem like it fits. But when we open up this publication and go to the contents page, you'll see that the whole first half of this publication is dedicated to attracting wildlife around your home. Okay, goes into a lot of detail about birds. We have some reference charts for trees and shrubs that benefit a wide array of wildlife. It covers water, providing water, the importance of that and the different ways we can achieve that, attracting hummingbirds, pollinators, and there are plant references. Now they're not all inclusive, but it's a good place to start. Like for example, oh, and also great pictures, I can't discount that. Shrubs and brambles, vines, these were the trees and shrubs that benefit wildlife. So those are great places to start. And then I'm going to go down to the herbaceous so you can kind of check that out. Talks about the types of bird feeds that different birds prefer. And then here we go, a sampler of native herbaceous plants that attract and support pollinators. So if you are having some trouble deciding which direction to go, this would be a great reference, a great starting point for you. If you want to get into a little bit more detail about native plants, remember that Tennessee Smart Yards website that Andrea introduced to us? From that website, you can see we have access our native plant database. This is a great link. You click on that and look up top at all these different tabs we have. You want to find out more about native flowers? We'll click here. I'm going to say common names. You can sort them by either common or scientific name. And then you can just scan through here and it kind of covers many of the common native flowers for Tennessee, grasses, vines, shrubs, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows about these resources and hope that they will guide you and be an aid to you as you are trying to implement some more sustainable practices in your residential landscape. That's all I got.
Wonderful. Thank you, Celeste. And just to give a huge shout out to Joyce Stewart down in Hamilton County, Master Gardener. She has been maintaining that native plant database and crafted all of the language that you see there so eloquently speaks about all of those native plants. So thank you, Celeste, for that. And with that, we're right at around noon Eastern time at least. But we'll stick around for any questions. Anything else from the group?
I just want to chime in and say thank you guys so much for that great presentation. The tour of the Backyard Sustainable Landscapes was awesome. We were sitting here texting each other going, we're just going to have to include this with all of our upcoming presentations. So I think that was just a really fun way to show the reality of what this looks like in place. And for all our Master Gardener volunteers on the call, we want to say that this is really kind of just the beginning. We want to, move into more steps to help you contact HOAs and, work with other residents in your area and really kind of spread this Smart Yards message. So definitely be looking for more coming out of our group.
Fantastic. I'm seeing some ideas already flowing in the chat here. Some folks already thinking about Smart Yards. So appreciate the opportunity to share with you all of this wonderful work that our work group is doing. And please spread the word. That website, spread it out to anyone that you might have in your communities. Send it to your HOA, whoever might be interested. So.
Oh, and should we also mention, Natalie, what we discussed at our last Master Gardener work group concerning Tennessee Smart Yards?
Yeah,
and
let's do that.
gardeners can benefit from that program?
Yes, essentially what we want to do over the rest of this year is provide an opportunity for you as volunteers to get both education hours participating in the Smart Yards modules that are online, but also service hours for some of the educational outputs that we can actually kind of borrow from you for what you do in your own backyard. Just like you saw Bob demonstrate for us today, we would love to have master gardeners across the state who had those really practical and fun and replicable smart yards applications in their own backyard, and we'd like to give you some service hours for that. So keep that in mind, and you'll be hearing more about that in the very near future. And so thank you very much, Taylor and Andrea. I think Taylor's going to be hitting the road and coming down to join us, but Andrea and Celeste, we will see you again soon. Thanks so much for joining in with us.